So I think this is a great time to get started. Thank you all for joining us again for another MedTech Town Hall. We're super excited to have you all here. I see a lot of familiar faces, which is so great. So really do appreciate everyone who's been kind of joining in for all of these. And if this is your first one, I really hope you get something out of it. Just to go through a little bit about the program. So we're doing this because we want to make sure we inform everyone of what's going on in the community, give everybody a place to come together and chat, as well as give some inspiration around the exciting things that are happening in this time. So we have an incredible list of speakers for our program today. Joe Berger from Battelle is going to give us an inspiration update, something to be really excited about. Dario Ambrosio from Propel is going to give us a product development update. So again, really exciting, innovative things coming out of a really tough situation that we want to keep everyone aware of. And Jeanette Numbers from Loft is going to give us a really great chat about some of the things that are happening in the MedTech manufacturing and supply chain space. So you're really going to want to stay through to the end. We should be able to get through everything in an hour today. So hopefully be done right around 1 o'clock. From a background noise perspective, if you are not asking a question, try to keep yourself muted. That way we don't have any feedback or anything going on. If you want to ask questions while we're going through, you can either choose the raise your hand section or feel free to chime them into the chat bot. We'll be entering things throughout the process. So if you have any instant questions, put your hand up. We'll make sure to call on you. Otherwise, feel free to share them with the crew in the chat bot. Before I turn things over to Brian for a quick kind of MedTech update, I wanted to let you know about some exciting events that are upcoming in case you want to put them on your calendar. April 23rd, we have a MedTech at Home, Key Tips for Designing Medical Devices for Home Use webinar. April 28th, there's a Human Factors Engineering update from Goddard on user-centered design. Both of those events are on our website, and I'll put the links in the chat bot for everyone. And then something I'm really excited to give you an update on is today we're announcing our next Women in MedTech event, and it's going to be a series. So a lot of you have had the opportunity to come to our quarterly Women in MedTech events. They are not just for women, FYI, but we have been wanting to get things started and keep it moving virtually. So we're announcing today a series of 4 events that will happen over 4 weeks, beginning April 30th. Each 1-hour session will focus on a different topic with the theme of bringing us together for learning, laughter, and community. Now, if you've attended our events in the past, you know that normally these events are between $75 and $150 a ticket. We're waiving all fees for these events and asking that you consider making a donation to our charity partner, New Hope. New Hope is a group fighting tirelessly to help the victims of sexual and domestic abuse rebuild their lives. All of your donations are tax deductible, and we would encourage you to give what you can. When you sign up for the event, there will be a link to do that through Eventbrite. Additionally, as an incentive, any business or individual who donates $100 or more will be entered in a raffle to win a Mass Medic event season pass. So the season pass will include a ticket to 4 of our upcoming signature events. It's a $1,000 value. So for $100, it seems like a really great way for you to give back to the community and also hopefully get something really exciting out of it. So we really appreciate your support in all this. There'll be more information coming. And like I said, all of it will be on our website and be announced. But I wanted to give you a little preview in case you could keep it on your radar. In that, I will turn it over to Brian.
Thank you, Rachel. And we're really excited about all of our upcoming programming that we have. Particularly, I think this Women in MedTech series is so important. And we've had a conversation with our partners at New Hope this week. And I want you to just imagine what it must be like for some of the people affected by this or domestic abuse victims stuck in the house with their abuser, and understand that this charity is all about helping those people get out of situations. And think about how much harder it is to do that now when all of our resources are virtual. And the money that you donate will be going towards their capital campaign. They're building a permanent group home in the South Shore, and we've partnered with them. This is our 2nd year in a row, and I think the world of this organization. Also, Life Science Cares, another partner of ours, has been raising a significant amount of money for grants for local charities you, I would love it if you guys checked out their website as well to see what you can do to help. I wanted to just kind of quickly go over a couple things that are new this week. Um, One major development is the Massachusetts Emergency Response Team for Manufacturing has released almost $11 million in grants towards companies looking to create PPE or other products aimed at protecting healthcare workers and folks like that, trying to stand up manufacturing here in the Commonwealth, particularly. Those grants, the call is right now. It's ongoing. Just announced this week. So a good way to if you're making investments in your production capabilities and you think you can get into the PPP production area, it's a great way to fund some of those activities. You can find out more about that on our COVID-19 response page. You just go to massmedic.com, the front page, and you'll see it. Just click on that button and you'll find it. Um, we're also working with MassBio and a couple other partners on best practices for back to work. If you have an internal plan that you're willing to share as part of a collaborative plan, please send that over to me, Brian at MassMedic, and because we want to know what our companies are doing. We're trying to create a template, and we'll have a webinar as well on that. To me, that is that's the $1 million question right now, is how do we create the processes for which we return to work? Not that working from home isn't really fun. 5.5 weeks, 6 weeks in, I think working from home will no longer be a benefit ever. I'm really anxious to get back into the swing of things, but we have to do it safely, and we have to make sure that the safety of our workers is paramount here. So we're trying to work on that and be of assistance. Last week, I think we had a really terrific town hall, and it just occurred to me, like, so many of the lessons we are hearing on these programming is really about leadership. And I just want to thank the folks who in these times are really stepping up as leaders of your organizations. um, I just feel like and I've developed a mantra, is that who you are now is who you are. And I really believe that we have seen some incredible examples of leadership in our community of MedTech. We're going to hear from stories today from some companies that have stepped up and done really great things. But I also just want to shout out, I see Maria O'Malley here from Medtronic. Medtronic's done some really exciting things. Their new training app that they've collaborated with all the other ventilator companies to help train people on how to use ventilators. It's a terrific example of bringing people together in leadership. And we've been trying to highlight these stories of our companies stepping up and stepping into the fray to help. Please continue to send those to us. I think it's really important to share those with the community, because it inspires us. And really, right now, what we need more than anything is to keep our energy up. There are so many factors that we can't control, that anything that can bring a smile to our face, or a feeling of pride, some motivation to continue to fight in the face of a pretty tough situation, I think is really important. So I also want to encourage you to, on the COVID-19 response page on MassMedic, we have all the previous town halls on video, and you can click and watch some of those. So use it as a resource. Use us as a resource. There's so much more to come. We're going to be announcing new partnerships in the next few weeks. We're going to continue to program, and we're going to continue to make MassMedic a key organization for you and your business development, and also, as you can see with our Women in MedTech program, your personal development. So please register for those events. Please help us out with donations for New Hope. And I'm just so excited to hear the programming today, because I am starving for good news, and I think we have a few really nice stories here to tell you.
Fantastic. I think that leads so well into Joe Berger from Battelle. love you to jump in and give us your inspiration story. So we reached out and asked Joe and his team if they would give us an update. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it in the news, you know, N95 masks, but the masks are so hard to come by, right? And so what can we do to make the situation better? Well, Battelle stepped up and said, hey, we've got some decontamination systems that we may be able to throw into the mix here. So Joe, love to hear the story.
Great. Brian and Rachel, thanks so much for having me today. I'm sure, can you see my screen now?
Looks good.
Yes, we're good.
Thumbs
Yep.
up?
Yep.
Good, perfect. So you should see a big picture of a bunch of N95 masks and a slide with the wrong date on it. Sorry about that. Great way to start. Anyway, thanks so much for having me. So my name is Joe Berger. I am in charge of everything Battelle does commercially. So for those of you who don't know about Battelle, we are a large not-for-profit contract research and development organization based in today sunny Ohio, Columbus, Ohio. And that's where I'm coming to you from this afternoon. So most of the work we do is with the US government, but we do work commercially. We do design and development work in the medical device community. We do preclinical testing for biopharma and pharma companies. We do work in the carbon sequestration area for oil and gas and for ethanol companies who are interested in leveraging some tax credits in that space. So we work broadly across a variety of commercial markets as well as the government market. And I'm going to tell you the story of how this CCDS, critical care decontamination system, came about in an unbelievably fast amount of time. I've worked for high-tech startups, and I have never seen a company move as quickly as Battelle moved to get this onto the market and out helping hospitals address this shortage in N95 respirators. So the picture that you're looking at is actually masks being decontaminated, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go ahead, if I can figure out how to move my slide. There we go. So what I wanted to do was walk you through the timeline here and talk about how this got started and then how we made it a reality. So it turns out back in 2016, I said we do a lot of work for the government. Back in 2016, we actually went to the FDA and pitched them an idea. And that idea was, hey, if there's ever a pandemic and there's a shortage of N95 type masks, is there a way we could decontaminate those masks for reuse to help address that shortage? So the FDA bought into that and gave us a contract to do that research. So really nice to see that folks were thinking ahead, both on our side and the government side, to address a situation that we're actually in right now. So we did that work for FDA, did that study, found out that actually you could use vapor hydrogen peroxide to decontaminate these masks and that they can be decontaminated up to 20 times without losing their efficiency and effectiveness or their physical characteristics. They actually can be decontaminated more times than that, but what happens is the heads start to degrade. So so we did that study, put it on the shelf, and then COVID hit us early this year. So we started to do some research there. We're doing research in a lot of areas. We developed a rapid test in conjunction with Ohio State University, who's right across the street from us. That's been rolled out here locally. We are doing lots of preclinical testing work on vaccines in our lab. So we have the largest privately owned BSL-3 lab in the country. And we have lots of COVID virus in that lab contained, thankfully. And our folks are working with that every day. So we started working on that, but we really weren't doing anything on this decontamination system until sort of prophetically, a woman who works for Ohio Health, which is a large hospital system in this area, who is married to a guy who works for Battelle, was sitting down with him at dinner one evening. And she's a physician who's responsible for actually making sure the physicians at Ohio Health stay healthy. And she was very concerned about this lack of N95 masks and was telling her husband, you know, she didn't think they were going to be able to get masks. She didn't know what was going to happen. She was really starting to come to her wit's end. And she said, you know, gosh, wouldn't it be great if we could reuse those masks? And her husband looked at her and said, well, you can. And she said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, I worked on a study 4 years ago that we did for FDA, and we proved that you can decontaminate these masks. Well, one thing led to another. About 2 days later on a Sunday, our management team met with Ohio Health's management team, and that started the ball rolling. And so this thing became a reality. So from that conversation, which happened in early March, to about March 22nd, when we built and installed our first system on a site we have just west of Columbus here to validate that the process works, to going to the FDA and getting an emergency use authorization about a week later, to deploying our first 6 systems. So we have 6 systems in the field now, one of which is in Somerville, servicing the Boston area. And we are rolling out an additional 54 systems over probably the next 3 to 4 weeks. So we started to do this on our own. So we basically took the risk and said, this is something that's needed. We'll figure this out. We'll figure the business model out. I often say to my team, we're flying the plane while we're building it in this instance. And we've made a lot of mistakes, but we're fixing them and moving forward. So we rolled these things out, and at the same time, we were talking in parallel with the government about whether they'd be interested in funding this activity. And we signed a contract with them just last week to provide funding to roll out 60 sites in total and to operate those sites for up to 6 months to support not only hospitals, but also first responders, any healthcare providers who need their masks decontaminated so that they can reuse them. And if you haven't seen, some of the press we've been getting, there was a great story in the Globe just recently, quoted a nurse, Mass General, who said she had gotten a decontaminated mask back, and they were packaging them. Mass General is actually putting them in little like Big Mac containers when they send them back to their nurses. And she said it was opening that container was like getting a Christmas present. And she actually, it was her own mask. So hospitals are labeling in some cases the masks with the individual healthcare providers' names or initials and getting them back to them. And she said it was already pre-fitted, so it was like getting her own customized mask back. But we turned this thing on really broadly about 2 weeks ago. We've gotten over 5,000 inquiries that my team has had to handle, and my team is not used to handling that volume of inquiries. So it's been a little bit overwhelming, but we are caught up. We've put a bunch of systems in place to automate that. They've done a great job on that. We've got probably close to 300 contracts in place with hospitals now to provide this service. And we've gotten a tremendous amount of social media awareness that's been generated from this too. So it's been a really, really cool process, and just watching the reaction, just seeing on things like Twitter, nurses posting pictures of their returned PPE, their decontaminated masks, and just the thank yous we've gotten from the community have been really, really awesome. So how does the system work? I'll walk you through a little bit about it, and then I'm happy to answer any questions after this. So what we do once we get the paperwork in place with the hospitals or the providers, and let me step back. So when we did get the contract with the government, we then went out to all the hospitals and basically told them this service is now free. So we are decontaminating their masks for no charge. So they collect the masks. They need to set up processes internally. We have suggested processes and procedures that we've taken from others, best practices that we can share. They collect the masks, put them, bag them, then put them in a double bag. They clean that, sanitize the outer bag, put it in a box, and then they ship that box to our local site, so the site that's closest to them. We're working right now to set up an agreement with Cardinal Health, who will serve as a logistics provider for us, so they can pick up and ship back those masks for our hospital partners, which makes it a little easier for the hospitals. Those masks get delivered to the CCDS site. We barcode and log them into the system. We then load them into the system. And let me paint you a little bit of a picture about what a system looks like here. So a system consists of 8 shipping containers, so the kind you would see going down the street on the back of a flatbed. 4 of those containers are used to actually process and decontaminate the masks. So that picture you saw On the first slide was the inside of a shipping container loaded with racks, loaded with masks. 4 of them serve as decontamination chambers, and then the others are really supporting inbound masks so we can stage them, supporting outbound masks so we can hold them until they're ready for pickup, until they're picked up by the hospitals or the courier. And then we have the utility containers that hold supplies and any other things we need, like PPE, to support the staff that's on site there. So we load those on a truck, ship them to the location, get that set up, and right now the government is basically telling us where to send the next shipments. So once they got engaged, FEMA is now actively involved with us. They've outlined the next 50 locations for us, so we're now shipping about 1 of these a day and trying really hard to ramp that up faster. So the masks get there. Our workers who are wearing PAPRs and are donned in PPE load those masks into the system. We then close up the system, start to pump in the hydrogen peroxide, expose those masks for about 2.5 hours, which is what the validated process that we worked with back in 2016, was determined to be the right amount of time. And what that does is it allows the hydrogen peroxide to really saturate the mask and get into the different layers to decontaminate. We then outgas and vent the system. So you need to let that hydrogen peroxide basically evaporate or dissipate from the masks. So we monitor that, and when the levels inside the decontamination chamber reach 1 ppm, we then open it up. The workers go back in, they then package the masks back up into bags and into boxes, and they do that packaging inside the system so it's clean, and we then send those back to the hospital. So each hospital has a 3-digit code that we assign them when they sign up. So all their masks are labeled with that code, so a hospital gets back the masks that they send to us. They also can use a 2-digit code if they choose to. So if you're Mass General Hospital, your code might be MGH, and if you want those to go back to the emergency department, your code on that mask might be MGH-ED. So it goes back to the emergency department, and then those masks can go back to the healthcare workers who have sent them in the first place, if that's how the hospital chooses to run those logistics internally. I think that covers everything on this. And I believe that's my last slide. So I kind of ran through that quickly, and I'm happy to answer any questions you all have about the process, about Battelle, or about anything we're doing. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. I mean, I know I have a question, but if anyone else has questions, feel free to raise your hand or chime them in the chat bot, and we'll call on you. Take yourself off mute. I think my first question is, from a long-term perspective, seems like it would be fantastic to keep using these systems, right? With a good waste reduction, if hospitals could potentially be using these even for just a few cycles to decontaminate PPE in the longer term. Has there been any discussion or conversation around that?
There has been discussion about it, sure. Most of the discussion has been, gosh, that's great, let's think about that at some point in time, because we've been so focused on getting these things built and deployed and getting hospitals signed up to use the system. I think there's a couple of, so first of all, understand now that the government owns these systems. So they've paid us for the system. So really it's going to be their decision on how to use these longer term. I agree with you completely. We've had many hospitals who have said to us, is this something we can use long term? I think a lot of that depends on, what it would cost to do this, to provide this system on an ongoing basis. And I don't know the answer to that question right now. We're still trying to figure out, what it really is going to cost in the long run as we reach full capacity on these systems.
Hey, Joe,
that makes sense.
Sorry, Rachel. This is Martha Shaden. I have a question for you. Sure. So these masks are labeled as single use, correct?
I believe that's true, correct.
So who holds the liability if there is a contamination associated with the mask? Not to say that you aren't doing a great job, it's just, the potential does exist with reprocessing.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason we have a contract that we need, even though this is a $0 service at this point. That's one of the reasons we have a contract with the hospitals, so that we can define clearly who owns what risk. And the hospital, Battelle basically just guarantees that the process works as advertised, essentially. And the risk associated with something like that would be something the hospital has to decide that they're willing to accept.
Hey, also just one last question.
Mm-hmm.
Have you gotten any feedback from the manufacturers of these masks?
Sure. Yeah, we've been in close contact with 3M in particular and with Honeywell to talk about this. So we have sent masks back to Honeywell. They were interested in, basically, they sent us a bunch of new masks. We ran some masks through our process, and then we just set aside controls as the others, and then we sent those masks back to them for testing. The testing that they have done so far has shown no difference between the new masks and the reprocessed masks. As you might imagine, they aren't going to broadly advertise that. I mean, I wouldn't do it either if my business was selling masks, but they also haven't said that they can see any real difference in performance between the two masks.
Thank you.
Yep.
Awesome. We've got a bunch of questions in the chat bot, so I'll throw them out there for you.
Sure.
What's the turnaround time from mask receipt to deliver to the provider?
Yeah. So right now, every mask is coming in and going back out within 24 hours. What we said at the beginning of this process is that our target was going to be 72 hours. Clearly, that's going to be based on how many masks we receive. So the Boston site has turned on faster and sent more masks to us than any other site we've got out there so far. The response in the Boston area has been just great. We had Partners Healthcare helped us get the site set up. Actually, it's right next to their headquarters. And they've been really, really good about getting the word out to their peers in the healthcare community. And so we've turned on very quickly here, but we're still getting everything turned around in 24 hours. I think the long-term answer is, as we reach capacity in different sites, it's very easy to send out a couple of additional decontamination units and an additional hydrogen peroxide generator. So we can add capacity pretty easily if we need to do so.
That's awesome. Okay, so does the decontamination only work with melt-blown fabric, or are there other types of filters or materials you might be able to use this for?
Yeah, so the limitation on the process right now is any N95 mask that does not contain cellulose, and there's lots of information on NIOSH's website, and we have links to that to help healthcare providers understand what can and cannot be sent to us. We are looking right now at other things we can treat in these systems. So I think the next one on our list is face shields. We expect to take that to the FDA here within the next few days and ask for an emergency use authorization to cover face shields. We're looking at other things like surgical masks. We're looking at other PPE. We're looking at ventilator parts. So ventilator tubing, some of the consumables associated with ventilators, can we decontaminate those effectively? So we actually have a very long list of things that we're looking at right now to see if there's a way we can help reuse things that are in short supply.
Okay, two more things. I just want to draw your attention to Barbara in the chat bot. She's with the Consulate of Mexico, and they would love to chat with you offline about potentially talking. So Barbara, maybe you want to shoot Joe an individual message, that way you guys can connect, and we'll make sure you have contact information.
Yeah,
and
can I quickly just, so we have, from the very beginning, we've gotten lots of international inquiries, as you might imagine. We now have a separate, we've put somebody in charge of responding to those, because I and my team are really focused on what we're doing domestically here. So we are starting to address some of those inquiries internationally and trying to actually find partners to work with internationally. So yeah, if she'd like to reach out to me, I can connect her to the right person internally.
Awesome. And then one last question. Any tips for dealing with FEMA?
No, sorry. So I haven't been the person dealing with FEMA directly. As I mentioned at the start of this, my team and I are really the commercially focused arm of Battelle. We have a whole government business development team that does that and has been engaged in those discussions. So I can't give you any good hints on that. I wish I could. Sorry.
No worries. That was a Brian question anyway. It's just you can ask him later.
Yeah.
But just thank you so much, Joe, for taking the time to chat with us and help us to be inspired by some of the work that you all are doing. It's simply fantastic. So
great. Thanks.
Cheers.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. All right. You're welcome.
Absolutely. Okay, this seems like a great time to transition to Dario Ambrosino from Propel. Propel has been doing some really exciting work and just launched a new program today that we wanted to make sure everyone knew about. So Dario, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Can I present here?
Yes, I can help manually make that happen. There we go. You should see a screen share at the bottom.
Okay, are you able to see my screen here?
We can see it.
All right, and we'll just enter full slide. All right, well, thank you for having us. I think a few of you have met Propel in the past. Nate Brown on our team, who's on the call here, and then Chuck Sarin, who has been involved with the Ignite program. I'm actually based on the West Coast, so going back to the work from home, the whole plan was to spend a lot more time in Boston this year and get a lot more involved with Mass Medic. So it hasn't quite worked out as expected. And I have two young daughters who like to fight a lot. So I too am looking forward to getting back into the office as soon as possible. But for those of you who we haven't had a chance to meet yet, Propel is a technology provider for the medical device industry. A lot of med device manufacturers use our EQMS system, but we have a fully functioning product lifecycle management, product information management on top of the quality management system. So everything that med device manufacturers need to build, create, design, produce that product, and then moving on to commercialization of the product, and then having the fully validated QMS system, we manage all of that on a single platform. So when COVID hit, most of our efforts here were in support of our customers who are already in the industry. So as you would expect, companies like Advanced Sterilization Products or Cantel Medical, most of what we were doing was helping them as they were shifting their production lines. Then we got into some of the non-med device manufacturers who decided to join the fight. So in the Boston area, Desktop Metal, Form Labs, they started actually creating PPE or started creating parts that were in shortage to help some of the devices. And that's where our second wave came. And then finally on our third wave, we have been really trying to figure out how we could use our technology to help. And that was one thing that was always lacking. Most of our efforts were to help other people, to help our customers. And then we realized that companies and some of the companies started releasing the designs for their own products in the hope that others could take the designs and accelerate time to market of their own designs. But the people who were trying to do that just simply didn't have the ability to extract the information in a usable form. So Nate Brown actually had the idea that we could take some of the bill of materials, some of the designs that had been released, load them into our system, make them available to the public. And now anybody who wanted to find alternate component suppliers, who wanted to use maybe their own design and use this as a starting off point, could take the information, and rather than spending weeks trying to extract it from zip files, they could come and just use our system. And we realized that if we did make this available to the public, that we could really accelerate the time to market. And because Medtronic had recently released its ventilator design, we started there. So the goal now of the community that we're launching is to help accelerate time to market for ventilators. At some point, we will expand it, but for now, we're starting with just presenting all of the various information that you would expect to see if you were producing a medical device in our user interface. So this is an idea of how it looks. So as you can see, if you're somebody who wants to just start digging in, these are all links. These all have manufacturer numbers, manufacturer part numbers. So again, if you are somebody or a manufacturer who isn't necessarily in the ventilator space, if you aren't the type of company that even normally is going to build medical device equipment, but you are familiar with manufacturing, if you have any idle capacity, this is a great way to come in and see who the component suppliers are, see what is needed to actually get your own manufacturing up and running with one of these products. So this is something that we're launching today. It's starting small, and as I mentioned, the Medtronic ventilator design file, these were the first things that we loaded because this was made available on March 30th, and it's where we got a little bit more market feedback that, hey, this would really help us out if we could get these this information into more of a usable format. We use the Propel technology, as I mentioned. It's really more of a structured environment. So it's really just a SaaS technology that allows anybody who wants to see the information to digest it in a much, much usable form. And then we, working with Silicon Expert, we actually were able to load additional manufacturers, alternate sourcing, real-time component availability. So if somebody does want to take that design and build their own version, they can find their own suppliers directly in the system. And then we worked with Salesforce to just integrate some collaboration tools, and the community itself, it's built on a Salesforce community. So those of you who use Salesforce from the production side, it's one thing, but their usability, their ease of navigation, it's all incorporated into what we do. So the goal here is to make this something that anybody can join, poke around, find some usable information, and then collaborate with other suppliers and other designers to just kick off ideas and see if maybe they have ideas on how to improve or evolve the design. So that in a nutshell is what we're doing. We do plan to ultimately load additional designs. We'd like to get anybody who wants to participate as somebody who can provide feedback, ideas on additional bill of materials that we can design, any way that we can promote this, any improvements that we can make. We're always looking for ways that to make this better. But there are some links in here. If anybody wants more information, you can see what it is exactly that we're doing. I'm more than happy to answer additional questions. But ultimately, since this is launching today, we just left in our first 20 members this morning. They're in there poking around now, and we just want to get as many people in there collaborating and getting these new products to market as quickly as possible.
Awesome. I mean, and this seems really timely from a funding perspective, right? When there's all these new grant opportunities coming up for companies who want to be able to shift kind of what they're doing into a new space. Can I ask, how hard was it to find, I mean, one of the things that we're hearing pretty regularly is components, resources, all of these things are incredibly tricky to track down. How hard was it to put this together and to find those resources and be able to track them in real time?
I'm going to let Nate answer that one.
Absolutely. It actually isn't too difficult. We've got some great folks in our ecosystem. As Dario mentioned, Silicon Expert's a company who's owned by Arrow Electronics, and their main purpose is to find data and find where to get things, right, and find equivalents. So this was a 10-year-old design that was uploaded, so some of the components weren't available anymore, and that's what some folks were having issues with. They were able to go through and find out cross-references, find out what are the modern equivalents that would work and what's available today. So what we were able to do is pull information together of what's available today so that folks that are good at a particular thing, maybe they're making boards, maybe they're making a plastic part, whatever it is, we can bring them all together so they can do what they do well and come together to put this, bring to market ventilators.
And then in terms of the grant, Rachel, we haven't fully figured out. This is really, this is a high level interface for something that can be a very detailed process. So anybody who does decide to move forward with the manufacturing, we're working out the details now, but we're going to make at least a portion of our instance available for free from that perspective so that they can get started. So the grant money wouldn't need to be used for Propel. We'll support it from that perspective. It would be
absolutely.
more production lines and hiring and things like that. So our goal is to support this all the way through to getting them to market.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. Yeah, I just made that comment because it seems like every day, right? And Brian talked about it earlier. Some state and federal government options for groups trying to get into this thing are some obviously government grants, and I'm sure that goes for supply chain, right? Their manufacturing capabilities, shifting resources, all that stuff. So it just seems like it's really appropriate.
Yeah, yes. And to that point, we're starting with ventilators, but we've talked about, if there's a lack of ICU beds, if there's any other devices, like we're willing to support all of it. That's where we're hoping to get direction from the community. We realize that if you have a ventilator, it's not going to work if you don't have the fully functioning support around it. So any other ideas are certainly welcome.
Hey Dario, this is Brian. Thanks again. This is an exciting program. How do folks access? How do they access this? Do they have to be working with Propel already?
No, this is open to everybody. So we're trying to just get as many people as possible in the system. And if you follow this link here, propelplm.com/HMC, that's just a registration page. All we need is a name, company email address, and then a phone number. The phone number, you can get away without it, but that's how we call to walk you through any portion of the registration process. And from there, you just get access to the community and you can begin asking questions that way or reach out to us. So anybody can join and it's free.
Great. And then from the manufacturing community, folks who think they can pivot or have a part for ventilators that they can produce, should they follow that as well and sign up as a supplier, or how does that work?
Absolutely. So they can sign up, poke around, see what it is that they think they can contribute, and then there's ways to request access from within the site. And if you, to make a request from within the site, and if you make that request, we'll get you set up as a contributor, as a component supplier. We'll be able to get that information loaded for you. It can be tricky to load the information on your own. So for now, we want those to go through requests, and then somebody like Nate, who knows the system far better than any of us, will handle getting it uploaded.
Great. And then also, this is, we're starting with the Medtronic model, but are there other models that you guys are looking to source?
We've looked at a couple of other ventilator designs just because since that's where we started, that tends to be the device that we know more about. But again, we're looking for feedback from the community as well as anybody else on other devices that we should consider uploading. It is going to be contingent on the availability. Medtronic was very generous in allowing these files to be a permissive use license. So we were able to do that, but we do have to have permission of the manufacturer in order to do that.
Excellent, thank you.
Understood. And we do have a couple questions and comments coming in, just so we understand that the community is mainly for understanding the design files and procuring parts. Is there an opportunity, obviously each company who's trying to manufacture these would then be in charge of testing, integration, working with FDA to get approval. Is there an option for others who kind of handle that in the community to join up as well? Groups who are focused on helping get products through FDA, should they potentially sign up to contribute to the conversation, or are you trying to keep it specifically focused on supply chain?
No, we'd love for everybody to join. And if that is the type of contribution somebody can make, it's just a question of coming into the community and making sure that everybody understands that.
Okay. Great.
And the expectation, just to clarify, the expectation is that if somebody does come up with a workable design, if they decide to move forward, that's when we would give them more of that dedicated instance, the fully functioning technology platform, so that they can go through those approvals and bring it to market.
So this is really just to encourage an understanding of what's available, sharing of ideas and information, and hopefully improvements upon what already exists. Does that seem like a good?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
The wisdom of crowds type of play. If everybody can provide just a little bit of information on how to accelerate the process, it'll help everybody.
Fantastic. Brian, did you have any other questions? I think we got pretty much everything in the chat.
No, I just want to just commend Propel for what you guys are doing. I think this is a great example of joining in on a burning issue. So I hope if people have the ability to contribute to this, they should.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to share what we're doing here. It's great to work for a company that does back up just something like this. this is my first pandemic, so we're all learning as we go. And hopefully this isn't really needed for much longer, but in the meantime, we'll do everything we
Yeah.
can.
And I think it's really a great story of taking what you have and figuring out what you can do, right? And I think a lot of us are looking for that opportunity of, okay, and we've seen so many grassroots operations and people from smaller companies and working together and creating a community to say, okay, this is what's in my hand. What can I actually do with this? And I think this is a fantastic just example of that. So really commend you on it. It's great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, we have one more awesome speaker left up. I've asked Jeanette Numbers from Loft LLC to give us a really great update. So there was a program with Venture Cafe. I know a lot of you are familiar with Venture Cafe if you're from the Massachusetts area. A week or so ago, focusing on the supply chain, manufacturing, kind of state of MedTech and other industries as things are progressing with this pandemic. And I know Jeanette gave a fantastic presentation. I was only able to see part of it. So I asked her if she would jump on and give us a regroup. So Jeanette, it's up to you.
Great, thanks Rachel. I'm gonna share screen here and cool, okay. Can everybody see what I have?
Yep. Perfect.
Good, okay. So I only have about 10 minutes here. I want to get everybody on their way, enough Zoom calls for this round, but really what I wanted to highlight, rolling right out of what Propel just mentioned, we are in a community, everyone's bringing what they have to the table and trying to make it work for trying to solve the problems that are in front of us. So what happened last week, and I'm in Providence, we have a design company there, and actually I moderated a discussion of community leaders, academia, industry, state house, everybody coming together in one place to discuss sort of what is happening on the manufacturing side. And I wanted to just highlight today for you guys some of the key points, key takeaways that we heard in that discussion. And, you know, not necessarily things you haven't heard before, but because we're all here together, we all know people, we have sisters and brothers, literally or figuratively, on the front lines. As leaders of medical device development, we know that there is safety and efficacy involved, and that's what we want to be as leaders, bringing to the table to this really energized group of people trying to make things happen. So, whoops, skipping ahead, here we go. So really the talk was very raw, very vulnerable, but in the end, hopeful, lots of energy in the room, and just everybody wanting to help. And what the big takeaways I saw were really in 3 groups. Number one, testing. So you may have heard some of this before, but just to repeat, the future, what does the future look like for testing, for even beyond just positive, COVID testing, but beyond that? CVS and others are looking to maybe have labs in buildings where you're going to have essentially checkpoints with real-time and on-site testing. So when you check into a building, you're going to do the same procedure you do in, say, like a big law firm, where you have to present your documentation and go through like really essentially a virus checkpoint. It'll be the same as like a security checkpoint. And that's the level that we're looking at on the testing side. So again, beyond sort of testing for, yes, you have it or you don't, what does the full future look like ahead? And this is coming from what CVS is thinking about and building on their Minute Clinic ideas. Okay. The next thing that came up was this idea of the next wave. And I think everyone's heard this in different instances. So what does the next wave of work from home, businesses opening look like? And that category we were hearing called care from home. So this is the next level of folks who are not maybe on the front lines, but are still vulnerable. How can we serve those communities with safe and effective masks, devices, procedures, so that they are practicing the same level of safety and efficacy that is happening, at the hospitals and at the emergency rooms. So care from home as a sort of a next wave of where we can focus some attention. And then the last section here, I called 3D printing, but really this is about something Propel sort of touched on, but this idea of manufacturing things real time and quickly turning them around. But there's a gap here, which is, you know, you have a lot of energy, you have a lot of folks who have 3D printers in their basement, for instance, they're ready to print ventilator parts, but there are no systems of regulation to sort of, you know, ensure that these are quality, that there's a tracking system, you know, all the procedures that we follow as medical device developers. So the proposal here is really to implement systems like that into a 3D printing space. So number one, maybe Propel has talked about design files that have been approved and validated. So basically a library that you can check out of approved design. So we don't have all this reinvention and recreation of, you know, things that really aren't optimized for 3D printing. So that's one side of it, the library of approved files. And then the other side is a system of either, you know, checkpoints or SOPs, you know, things we live with every day as leaders in this industry, but we can implement out into the makerspace, if you will. There is a lot of energy there, and we want to keep that up, but we want to give them some systems so that they are set up for success. And that was really it. The highlights of the talk from last week. Again, really, I think what we're seeing is this idea of design thinking in action. And, you know, it's something as a firm like ours, we live and breathe every day, but can be an abstract notion for maybe some other folks. So that's what I want to leave the team with today, is this building on what Brian said in the beginning of keeping the energy up as leaders, giving people hope and understanding that what they're doing is going in the right direction, that they can make a difference, and lead by example. So thank you to MassMedic for the opportunity, and looking forward to keeping the conversation going.
Thanks, Jeanette. I think what you just said too about the energy level, right, is it's such a positive thing, but it has to be harnessed in the right direction, which is why it's really interesting to see some of those tips. I know personally, I have questions and concerns around one of the first things that, you know, is being thrown about a virus screening and virus checking, right? On one hand, we have to look at it, and it's such a bigger conversation of we want to keep everyone safe, we want to be doing the right things, but at what point do we start to lose some of those levels of privacy, and what good outweighs other things? So I know those are very interesting conversations. Was there any chat at the event about that specifically?
Well, really what the vibe was more about collaborating across communities, across borders, across industries, and across disciplines, so that all of these things so everyone can weigh in on what their concerns are and bring all of that to the table at once. So that, you know, in our work, when we do, say, an app that involves private information, the first thing we want to do is establish trust with the consumer. And that, I think that those lessons can be pushed ahead in this case, where really putting systems out and checks and balances and giving the end user the feeling of trust that they can trust what you're doing with that data is one of the keys, I think.
That is a design thinking exercise right there, right? How do you develop trust in something?
Yes.
I want to make sure I
and it's transparency.
Right, absolutely.
Transparency.
There's a couple more minutes, so if anybody has any questions from the audience, please feel free to chime in. Brian, did you have anything?
Yeah, I'm just curious. That too piqued my interest, because I mean we've kind of talked about in some of the smaller groups that we've had about the role that landlords are going to play in this. Just curious, CVS is a global leader in that space. I mean, how active are they in terms of that? Process that we discussed. I mean, because I mean that's quite. I can see how it makes sense. It also does. I do have the same concerns, frankly, about the end of privacy.
Yeah, I can't speak to any specifics of what they mentioned, but the idea floated of minute clinic style labs, if you will, being appropriately and kiosks being set up in buildings. I am a landlord, so I have some concerns there too. I think one thing I see in the future is labeling. So much like no smoking and things like that. I think again, this is back to the establishing trust, just putting out that transparent information in front. It really goes a long way, so that no one feels like that they're being stigmatized, for being concerned.
It strikes me that there will be we're at the mitigation phase in some respects, but it strikes me that there will be some really consequential ethics discussions and then legal rulings in our future over some of this. So it's I don't know if there were any ethicists in the room at the conversation, but we might need to bring them involved in this.
Yes. Where does the line of individual versus community fall?
Yeah. Well, those are really big questions, but thanks for bringing those up. Those are really interesting.
I think that is a great way to kind of wrap things up for everyone who's looking in the chat bot. I did add the links to 2 of our upcoming webinars. Want to make sure you check those out. If you have any thoughts, please let us know. And please keep on your radar. Our first Women in MedTech series event will be on April 30th. We'll be sending out an email blast about it today with all the links to register. We'd really love your participation and your support and any help that you can give to New Hope as they continue to improve the lives of those suffering from domestic and sexual violence. This is really crucial and something we would love all of your support on. So with that, I will say thank you and have a fantastic rest of your day. We will send out a thank you email with all these links, the connections to the speakers if there's interest, and as well as the presentations that they made. So thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Nice seeing everybody.
Thank you.